Hi folks, this is all the fruit. I'm foraging in the beautiful old town of Ladenburg, near my city of Heidelberg in Germany. Very mild climate for Germany. I think nowadays it should already be in zone 8. Traditionally it was in zone 7b, now it should be 8a USDA. In the Rhine flat, so no hills or mountains around here. It's a very old town. It used to be the main Roman town in the area here and one of the main medieval cities. And the good thing is there is a Roman garden here and the Bible garden, so I'm very curious about those. Here I'm still at the train station in the new part of town, but Ladenburg also has a very beautiful old town. What I figured here: mouse barley and Bromus sterilis, two close relatives of modern grains, however both not edible for humans. The hawthorns are still green. We are towards the end of May in quite a cold and rainy year. Yeah, today it's nice and sunny, but still cold. I'm not expecting a lot of great fruits right now. Fruit season has started with the normal fruits around here, has started very hesitantly. But apart from cherries, strawberries and maybe mulberries and saskatoons, I don't expect much. Let's see. Here we have the elderberry. You can make very nice tea, pancakes and syrup from the flowers, but for that you need a kitchen. I'm too lazy right now. Also a lot of different roses. Rose petals are edible. But yesterday I tried a lot of different rose petals. Some are mild and tasty. Some bitter and astringent. Those here, yeah, no taste, but no taste is a good taste. Also not much smell. And here are the rose hips, which might be nice and edible in a couple months. Burdock and carrot. Burdock is the thing the aphids here like so much. Those here are wild carrots. Behind the wild carrots, the stuff that looks a lot like wild carrot but it's flowering, is some other relative, probably a poisonous one. Not sure which one, but I would stay away from it. Here somebody has made a little Mediterranean type garden with lavender and rosemary and more rosemary. And this big dandelion relative, I always forget the name, but it's edible. I just don't want to eat it here from the garden. I think they left it for a reason. Couple yuccas. The young flower stalks should be edible right now. Oh, daylilies. The flowers are also edible. And some sagebrush here. Oh, and here's some monk's pepper. This stuff is the opposite of Viagra. It makes you unable to perform. Laurel cherry, a whole laurel cherry hedge. The old Germans looking at me suspiciously and looking away when I start filming them. It's Germany. Get used to it. If you are a brown foreign looking man, I'm kind of used to it already. Beautiful lavender, by the way. The Syrian hibiscus, the national flower of, yeah, you guessed it right, South Korea. By the way, the flowers and fruits are edible. Topinambur with edible tubers. However, I don't think they will be good around now. Right now, all their strength is going into the young stems. Also more edible rose petals. Here, a nice vegetable garden. Those are getting more and more rare, unfortunately. Red cabbage, garlic, eggplants, peppers, tomatoes, lettuces back there. Not sure about some of the stuff. Well, we have onions, some nice kohlrabi. I think here we have corn and more lettuce and more peppers. Nice little garden. And since the fence is not high enough to stop thieves, they have added a fence made from willow branches. That's beautiful. Yeah, they seem to like working with willow branches here. Bladder bush. Don't confuse it with the bladder nut. You can pop both, but this one is poisonous. Here in the shade seems to be the nursery for the little garden. And here a couple fava beans. Unlike the kidney beans, where the whole plant, including the seeds, is toxic when raw, the fava bean, you can eat the whole plant without cooking it. In the distance, we are approaching the medieval city walls. Here a beautiful fruit garden with cherries. Not one, but three fig trees, currants, grapes, and raspberries. Yeah, I like this town. They like to grow a lot of food around here. And another fig tree here. And a lot more raspberries. And more currants. And pears. And somebody has cut back the kiwis. Lactuca seriola, the wild ancestor of lettuce. Lactuca and lettuce, yes, it's the same word. Coming from desert-like areas, pretty spiny and very bitter. However, people tell me they use it as a pot herb. Here we have Parietaria judaica, a relative of the stinging nettle, but it's not stinging. It should be edible if it's a relative of the stinging nettle, but I have not found anything in it. Well, I haven't searched for its edibility. Tastes like stinging nettle. Yeah, I have to research this one. Related to nettle, tastes like nettle, should be healthy like nettle. Climate change is hard. A couple eucalyptus tree and an evergreen holm oak here, right next to some pretty big Saskatoons. Beautiful city wall towers. I wonder if they are open to visitors. Yeah, my plan is to walk along the old city walls around here. Back in the Middle Ages, only cities were allowed to have a wall. Since Ladenburg used to be a Roman town or city, was actually the only real Roman town around here. I think it was an oppidum. Later it used to be, I think, the residence of some of the bishops. Was it the Bishop of Worms or of Speyer who resided here for some time? And here it's interesting. I wonder if for those houses they just made windows into the old city walls, or if they just put the house walls where the old city wall was. Well, looking very neat anyways. Also, there are no rocks in this area. You can see that the old city walls and the towers and everything are made of the pink sandstone from the Heidelberg hills. Well, down here we have basically, for foraging it's often quite important to know the local geology. Here we have basically two types of stuff. Limestone rich sediments from the Rhine River and more sour, more acidic reddish sediments from the Neckar River. However, I doubt that a lot of rocks were carried that far into the plains by the Neckar River. I think that in order to build those city walls, those rocks had to be broken in the hills behind Heidelberg and then brought here on ships and mostly rafts. Around here, rafting and timber trade was a big thing. So for heavy downriver transport, usually they did not use ships, they used rafts. Here's some mustard. I even forgot what it was. Was it some eruca or what? Oh, all mustards taste mustardy. Oh yeah, really mustardy. Looks like some creek has been flowing around here. Well, this year has been quite moist, but the last couple years we had a very severe drought, and so yeah, probably just straight up. See the little stalactites on the top and the stalagmite down here? That shows us the presence of limestone, of basically calcium carbonate. Well, and since the calcium carbonate comes from the mortar here, that also means that in the walls there should be a lot of plants, wild plants, which are not typical for an area, well, with sandstone rocks. So the sandstone rocks and the soil around them, they would be the base for one specific type of vegetation, but the mortar in between, especially when it weathers down, it's a different one. By the way, this little plant, it's one of those things like the peanut, where the flower first grows into the light and then later, see, the young fruits, they grow away from the light. They are trying to get into those little cracks here. A plant which basically doesn't spread very far on its own, but tries to put its seeds back into the little crack it came from. It spread quite far in Berlin about 100 years ago, and all the botanists were wondering why. And then on his deathbed, a poet said that he liked this little plant, this Cymballaria moralis, so much that he used to spread its seeds around a lot of old walls in Berlin. For decades the botanists were baffled about that, and this clever poet, he waited, and he only revealed the secret on his deathbed. Plantain is edible. Dandelion, also edible. Wood sorrel, also edible. And yeah, it really shows that it's quite a moist year, because there is Poa annua, this little grass which grows everywhere around here. In the last dry years it had become quite rare. By the way, this thing has spread throughout the world with humans, and is actually the first, well, the first introduced plant and the first, yeah, you can say invasive species even in Antarctica. And here, of course, the super tasty chickweed, but I'm not gonna eat it from this location. I bet those are not the original city gates, but who cares? Let's sneak into the city. Edible mellow, Oregon grapes. Here we have real grapes. Elm. I never managed to try to fry the fruits of an elm. Oh wait, is this an elm? No. No, this is not an elm. This is an Ostrea carpinifolia. This is, what was it called? Hop hornbeam. Yeah, also supposed to be edible, but I did not like it when I tried. It has itching powder. And here's sumac. A popular spice comes from this tree and its relatives. Now here we are in the old town. It's quite an extensive old town, so not everything is really original. Here you see the one more or less original half-timbered house. I think a lot of those here might also be half-timbered, but after World War II a lot of people were ashamed of those half-timbered houses, so they covered them with plaster. And decades later they found out, oops, those wooden supports here, they are not supposed to be covered with plaster, because then they will rot. They are supposed to stay on the fresh air. But still, there is not a big renaissance of scraping away the plaster from the old half-timbered houses. And here By the way, see this house where the bricks are arranged with holes between them? This is an old tobacco barn. So that's where the tobacco leaves were dried. Around here it's funny, the cash crops were basically tobacco, hops, wine and hemp. All quite drug related things. Basically people until the 20th century would be self-sufficient more or less on their farm, but they grew a cash crop mostly for paying their taxes. And in those villages around here in the Rhine flat, this was mostly tobacco and it was dried. This is one of the typical old tobacco barns. There are a couple other types around here too. Kaki tree. This will have tasty big fruits in a couple months. Oh, and here's some, look at those figs. This seems to be some quite big / early variety. Look at their size, even in May. And everywhere remnants of old walls. Oh, hi kitty, you look dangerous. A beautiful place. It's one of the towns around here I like. Ah, here is some chickweed I can try. Also, tasty. Also, in old towns, you have old people, and listening to old people, you learn crazy stuff. You know, I once listened to a crazy-looking old man here in the old town of Ladenburg, and he gave me a first-person lead on one of the most important treasures in Germany, the Amber Room. All of Germany and half of Eastern Europe are looking for the Amber Room. And this guy, yep, he did have some first-person accounts, and they were not flashy or crazy, so I totally believe him. Here, by the way, one of the old medieval streets. Beautiful, with those fancy columns here. This was not a normal farm. This was some Herrenhof, or the farm or the mansion or the, yeah, what you say, palazzo or hacienda of some lord. Not necessarily the lord of this town. Can be also some other lord who just had property in this town. Freemason signs. Those are quite common because the Freemasons, well, before they were a secret society, they were masons who were free, so they could travel between the different towns. And that's why this Freemason sign probably doesn't mean anything conspiracy-like, but just this side up or this side this way. Beautiful. And they have made a lot of those little crossings through old courtyards and stuff, so that you can admire them. And I'm pretty sure that this one has been divided into lots of little apartments a long time ago. Some Portuguese laurel cherries in those pots. Those are among the most bitter cherries I've ever encountered. Even the bitter seed is not as bitter as the bitter fruit. And again, a couple beautiful old lanes with half-timbered houses with colonnades where you could basically sell your goods in rainy or very sunny days. 1480. Ladenburg is more well known for its Roman heritage, but actually there is not much Roman left here except for some foundations and some stuff in the museum. There is a lot of medieval stuff here, so the town is definitely worth visiting. If I'm not mistaken, this should be the old. Oh yeah, it is the old town hall. The old town halls around here, they usually had such an open space underneath them where people could gather for different purposes. This is a Baroque town hall. Well, those half-timbered houses, they are more or less timeless. I think around here is where the old guy told me about the amber room. Lime or linden tree. Those have nothing to do with limes, however their smell is kind of a little bit limey. You can actually use the flowers, they make a very good tea. The leaves make quite a good fodder. The timber is very soft and very good for carvings or spoons or such things. And also, very often you can find sweet manna on the leaves. Manna is aphid poop, but still, it's sweet. You can lick it off the leaves. Beautiful. There are thousands of such towns in Germany. And before World War II, there were tens of thousands of such towns in Germany. But by now, well, they restored a lot after the war. And actually the Americans often paid for the restoration of the stuff they had bombed. But still, Europe has lost so much during those wars, so stop doing wars, folks. I want to enjoy beautiful old towns, and your wars do nothing but destroy this nice architecture. Actually, when I was at school, I learned how you recognize old medieval houses, how rich the people were. If they have just a lot of straight beams like here, they were kind of well off. If the beams are kind of crooked, they were quite poor because they couldn't afford straight wooden beams. And the more carvings and fancy stuff you had here, the richer the people were. Basically, yeah, if you were really rich, you could afford a house of stone, but throughout the Middle Ages, there were kind of restrictions. Not everybody was allowed to build houses from stone, so the rich people would just pay craftsmen to do some really fancy wooden or timbered houses for them. Here, by the way, this should be Crategos cruscali and not very tasty hawthorn. Do I really want to do foraging here, or do I want to enjoy the beautiful old buildings? Here, by the way, a Washingtonia, a palm from Mexico and the US. It has edible fruits and also a very tasty heart of palm. Da Vinci. Oh, by the way, I remember decades ago I knew that the narrowest house in the world, or the narrowest inn in the world, was in Ladenburg, but I don't remember exactly where it is. Well, not this one. This is broad as heck. And those old cracks in the pavements of roads, you can often find a lot of interesting wild plants. Actually, 20 years ago, I would go around everywhere in Germany and also in other parts of the world, but mostly in Germany, and look for weeds and rare invasive, well, still rare invasive plants in urban areas. So back then I wouldn't have looked so much up like now when I'm looking for fruits. I would have looked down and checked every single plant in those cracks in order to find some rare ones. Here, by the way, another courtyard which was kind of restored and made into lots of residential buildings. Let's see, this is the Catholic Church, and here we have a beautiful old wall with ferns. Right now I only see Splenium trichomanus and Asplenium rutamuraria. Those would be the standard ferns to grow in cracks in walls here. But it's not impossible to find some rare ones. And here, by the way, the old Germans who survived World War II, they really hate this one, Giersch, Ecopodium podagraria. It's a weed. related to parsley and carrots. It tastes quite nicely if you just put a couple young leaves into your food. But back then, when they had nothing else to eat, for weeks or months, every second day or so, they would have a soup or a stew from this thing, because it was a wheat in fruit orchards and other areas. So a lot of them started to hate the taste because it was just too much. It has quite a strong taste, and eating it every day in big amounts is just too much. Beautiful ferns. This wall deserves some type of protection. Those should be the same species. Asplenium trichomanes var, what is it? Var quadrivalens, and this should be the var pachyractis. Yeah, beautiful. Pity I don't find some more rare fern species here. Yes, there was also a time I published a lot on those ferns, and I checked thousands of such walls to find a couple rare things. Actually, yeah, I would have published, maybe I even did publish the location of this wall, because such a population in such an area without natural rocks is actually something special. Mostly Gothic church, but somehow it feels Baroque. Probably got burned down at least partially and then rebuilt in kind of Gothic Baroque style. Some old basilica here, quite deep underground. Let's see, yeah, a couple decades ago I would definitely have jumped down here and checked every single fern here. Now let's check from above if there is something edible here. Oh well, I find a couple violets here. It's not completely impossible that this could be the quite rare Viola elatior, but I'm not sure. Well, it's edible like all violets. Oh, and here we have something very interesting. The invasive kiri tree. A colleague of mine found it for the first time invasive in the nearby town of Worms here. And now, just some quite few years ago, actually a big kiri plantation was planted here around Ladenburg, and they just cut it down recently. It's the fastest growing tree in the world. Provides a very light, very low quality timber, but in huge amounts. And yeah, it's funny. Right today I read that recently they had cut down the whole plantation, and now I see a feral one here in the excavations. Ivy, not edible, but a great climate indicator. Look how here it grows like a big bush. This growth form wouldn't have been possible in the outdoor German climate far east of the Rhine. Around here, still kind of possible. 30 kilometers further east, almost impossible outside of cities. This is actually maybe the most impressive ivy bush I've ever seen. Look at that. It's the size of a hut. I mean, the part which is self-supporting is the size of a hut. This is quite unique and not possible in cold climates. So ivy is a great climate indicator. You check 10,000 ivy plants in one area. You can basically do this in a week, and you can make a climate map, a very detailed climate map of this area and of the last decades. No modern technology would allow you to do this, but just observing the way ivy grows will give you more data than all modern gadgets together. And of course, from this data you can check what things you can forage in this area and what things you can grow in this area. So extremely valuable data. Of course, you can also eat the beautiful little daisies. And this Geum urbanum is called Nelkenwurz in Germany, clove root. Cloves were a very expensive spice coming from Indonesia, and the poor people who couldn't afford gloves would use the root of this thing, which had a similar flavor. I've never actually cooked with it. I should try it. More beautiful old town houses around this church. This town is not getting enough. This town is really not getting enough credit. The old town is much nicer than the Heidelberg old town, but all the tourists are going to Heidelberg. Look at those beautiful old houses. I don't care that this is a foraging video. I'll show you the nice architecture. If you don't like it, watch something else. Beautiful old houses. Beautiful. See this quite unusual ivy cultivar here growing right next to the church? Well, here we are still less than 10 kilometers away from Heidelberg, and in the Heidelberg monastery in Ziegelhausen, a monk had an ivy nursery, and actually had the biggest ivy variety collection in the whole wide world. And I think this plant here at the Catholic Church maybe also came from his collection. Unfortunately, he was using so many toxins for his ivy cultivation that he developed cancer right around his skin cancer and around his belly, where he was touching the tables with the ivy and with the poisons all the time. Yeah, after he did this, the monastery decided that they will eat only organic foods from now, and they will farm only organically. I used to know a couple of the old monks, quite nice folks. Yeah, unfortunately they're pretty much all dead by now. Well, speaking of monks, this is not the Catholic Church. This is the Protestant Church, like Protestant Church, Catholic Church. Around here, the 30 Years' War, the fight between the Catholics and Protestants, was actually much worse than World War I and World War II combined for this area. Basically, it lost 2/3 of its population because those people couldn't agree in which way to worship God. That was all about power and money. They just pretended for it to be about faith. But yeah, when I said that World War II destroyed a lot of things here, the 30 Years' War destroyed this area completely, basically. Yeah, burned it back into the Stone Age. And that's why the people around here, they're basically even genetically not really Germans, because this area got repopulated with people from Switzerland and from Burgundy. So genetically, people around here are actually basically closer to the French than to the Germans of northern or eastern Germany. And here, without further ado, we have a very interesting plant. Everybody here will tell you that this is an almond tree. They are just half right. The area around here, with the mildest climate in all of Germany, with the warmest climate in all of Germany, did actually export almonds for centuries throughout the rest of Germany. But those almonds are all but gone. 99.9% of all the almond trees around here are the peach almond, a hybrid between almond and peach. Here you can see one of the fruits. The flesh is almost good enough for them to be edible. I think you could use it in preserves and stuff. And the seed is actually like an almond seed. You can crack it and eat it. It's just very tough to crack. Why are they grown here? In the Mediterranean, they're usually grown as a rootstock for modern almond varieties. Around here, since we are not growing almonds anymore on a big scale, they're basically being grown because they flower earlier, bigger, darker, more dark pink than normal almonds, and they're much frost hardier. So now they're being planted everywhere around here just for their flowers. But if you know the trick, you can also eat the seeds. This is one of the reasons I'm here. The Bible garden. Those are gardens where you basically collect all the plants mentioned in the Bible. Oh, but wait, is this all? The other Bible gardens I know are much bigger. Still, I'm gonna do a dedicated video. Here we have another popular cash crop in the area, not as popular as tobacco. This is hops. You need hops to flavor beer. And there are a couple villages around here which used to have hops as their main cash crop. I actually saw the last big hop plantations around here decades ago, but now it's just an old memory. Tulips. Tulips caused the first modern stock crash in the Netherlands, and also in World War II. Tulip bulbs were eaten a lot by Dutch people when there was nothing else. However, Dutch people hated eating them, not because the taste is so bad, but because you spend the rest of the day on the toilet when you eat too many of those. Let's check out the inside of the Protestant church. Quite beautiful. And also those painted wooden ceilings are quite traditional. However, you don't find them a lot anymore because, well, wood burns. And so a lot of those restored churches, they lack them, but I guess this one you cannot really restore it without the wooden part because even the columns are made of wood. Back then, this would have been mostly a financial decision because tree trunks are much cheaper and easier to transport than a bunch of stones for the columns. By the way, those big tree trunks here in the church, also in the old half-timbered houses here and especially in Heidelberg, they are not from this area. Even since the late Middle Ages, the forests around here were so degraded that the forester from Heidelberg once said there is not a single straight tree in the whole city forest, only hazels and thorns. And basically all those big tree trunks, including the ones in this church, they were brought down here from the Black Forest, where there was a lot more there were a lot more undisturbed forests, well undisturbed until they cut them down, but they cut them down much later. Actually, cities like Heidelberg and Ladenburg, which were the capitals of little countries, they forced all the timber merchants to stop here with their rafts for a day or several days, which was absolutely loaded by the merchants because they would lose time. Time is money. And also they had to offer all their timber to the local people for a cheap price, which was even worse because they wanted to get this timber to the Dutch cities. The Dutch were paying prime prices. Basically the Dutch, in the 17th century, the Dutch ruled the seas, not Britain, not Spain, but the Dutch. And the timber for doing this most of it came down the Rhine, from the Black Forest, from the Alps, from the Vogesen mountains. Yeah, and those little towns like Ladenburg, which were part of little countries, they forced those merchants to sell their timber to the local citizens for a cheap price instead of getting paid in gold by the wealthy Dutch in order to build the fleet that used to rule the world back then. Cirsium arvense, the field thistle. This is basically the most important agricultural weed in Germany. The rhizomes grow very deep. There is almost no way to kill it. You would have to poison the soil many meters down to exterminate it. So a lot of the farmers are basically suffering it instead of being able to destroy it. Black locust. Those are native to the western United States. And actually, when you look at old western movies where they show those giant bridges made from timber, those impossibly tall and thin bridges, they are made of the indestructible timber of the black locust. Europeans introduced it a lot to stabilize railroad ramps, and Germany started growing it a lot about 100 years ago because after it lost its colonies and so lost the supply of acacia wood, they would use the black locust wood to make wheels for carts and automobiles. Now it's an invasive problem, but people still love it because the timber is basically indestructible. It also fertilizes the soil, which might be good for agriculture, but not so good for nature conservation, because in Europe biodiversity is highest usually on poor soils. That has something to do with the millennia of agriculture and soil degradation around here. The mountain maple, very variable timber. The seeds are kind of edible, and it is the only European maple which was used to a significant extent as a sugar maple. Not nowadays anymore. It's less productive than the sugar maple of Canada, and also people in Europe are now mostly too rich to have to rely on this, except in areas like Russia and so. And so, yeah, the use of this thing as a sugar maple is almost forgotten by now, but in older times in northern countries and in mountain areas, this was a very important sugar source. In spring, when people were almost starving, this was the first calorie-rich food they could get, while the rest of nature was still sleeping. This thing started producing good sugary sap in early spring. A walnut tree. Walnuts are quite common in this area because of the mild climate. There are areas in Germany where they were not so common until the 20th century because of the cold climate. The name of this thing is very interesting. In the US it's called the British walnut, which is not wrong. The other walnut species used in the US are mostly native, while this one, the British or English walnut, got brought by the colonizers from Britain. In Britain they call it the Persian walnut, which is even more correct because Persian surrounding areas are its true area of origin. In Germany they call it Walnuss, which means Welsh nut. They don't mean the same, they don't mean British nut bait. By Welsh, Valais is an area in the southern Alps where people speak Italian, and Welsh was basically also used as a word to describe Italians and their language in general. And here, yes, this nut originally came with the Romans from Italy. In Bulgaria they just call it the nut, while in Russia they call it the Greek nut, because almost all of Russia was historically too cold to cultivate it, so it was imported from places like Turkey, Greece and Bulgaria. So very interesting, the names of this thing in different countries say a lot about its history and about its climatic requirements. Here again the Catholic Church, a nice old lime or linden tree. This is actually a natural monument. In Germany, unlike in America, natural monuments are usually small or single objects like this tree. Naturdenkmal. Here you see the here you see the sign, and it's so funny that the Germans have a bald eagle on their natural monument sign. Ain't that funny, folks? Talking about bald eagles, in my street in Germany, in Heidelberg, well, actually it's the next street, there used to be the NATO headquarters for Europe. Not the central NATO headquarters, which is also in Europe, but the NATO headquarters for the operations in Europe. In a German barracks from the 1940s, from the early 1940s, and they used to have two beautiful eagles in front of the NATO headquarters, two beautiful eagles of stone. And all the old people said, wait till the Americans leave, then you will see the swastikas underneath the eagles. Well, the Americans left 10 years ago, and it turned out, when they have moved there, they had silently, by night, chiseled away the swastikas and just made the German Reichs eagles into American bald eagles. Every time I see those eagles with the circular rough patches in the stone underneath them, I remember this, and I laugh a little bit. And while we are already political, see the three guys here. In German, those are called old masters. Those are old fraternity guys, and now fraternities in Germany, they are not just about drinking and having fun. They are about drinking for... Drinking is hard work in German fraternities, but being a member of a German fraternity basically secures you 100% a good position in politics or trade. Basically, I don't know how it's now, but back in my time in the government of Chancellor Kohl, half of the people were from, more than half of the ministers were from fraternities. And now we have a lot of Antifa and such people who like to collect those. You see those colorful ribbons? 20, 30 years ago, I might have... I'm still a bit tempted, but let's keep it civil. Well, just filming all the time makes one hungry and thirsty. Nice typical German cake called Bienenstich. Made, by the way, with the almonds, which used to be an important cash crop around here in previous centuries. The beautiful old coffee shop, which I'm sure is also in a half-timbered house, which got covered in plaster. Must have looked like those houses around here before, but as you can see, a lot of them are covered in plaster. Unfortunately, there are still no laws to force them to uncover the beautiful old timber here in Germany. Funny, 40 years ago my teacher was complaining that they used to cover those houses in plaster in the 50s and 60s, and 40 years later there is still no law that forces you to uncover them again. Stopping on the old masters was quite interesting. Well, in America, fraternity guys are usually just seen as drunk and disorderly. In Germany, they are seen as drunk, disorderly, extremely successful by default because they had a fraternity, and also extremely right-wing. And if you think that those people are too old to be in a fraternity and just wear their ribbons and caps out of nostalgia, nope. They were actually still discussing serious fraternity business. Those people run and finance the fraternities and recruit, of course, the future political and economic leaders there. So, if you are German, blonde, able to drink beer on command, and to turn off your conscience, basically the easiest way to make a career in Germany is get into a fraternity. Enough politics, back to foraging. Let's go and find the garden of the Italian invaders. By the way, never use oleander branches to skewer your sausages or marshmallows. Actually, this stuff is so poisonous that even using the sticks is enough to kill you. A traditional German restaurant. What a pity. I already had too much cake. Beautiful. Must have been run by the same family with the same local recipes for centuries now. It seems that the Bundesliga, the German football championship, is on again. A goat statue instead of some king or politician. Totally approve of that. Hey buddy. Oh, so yeah, this is Germany, of course. It's a mechanical goat. Should have known that. Everything in Germany is technology. I once published a paper on this plant. It was basically extinct in Germany for like 100 years. Probably it was never extinct, just nobody was able to ID it. Sure, there must be a story behind this, but I have no idea. The prince and the bishop. Funny. Silverberries became very popular in recent years. Well, the plant, not the fruit. Nobody eats it. And well, most other fruits are not in season yet. The season of this thing has been over for months. Hotel in the Lust Garden. I want to see this. This looks more like a church garden than a lust garden. Well, this should be the palace of the bishop, I guess. So probably it's a lust garden after all. Really beautiful roses in this lust garden. Look at the size of them, and wow, this must be some really crazy variety. Also, really huge bush, growing up to 6 meters. So, we have big bushes in the lust garden. Also, the Italian garden should be somewhere around this lust garden. Mamma mia. Well, this wall is definitely Roman. However, this is Carolingian, this is Franconian, this is medieval. Oh. How do they even keep them apart? And where is the Roman garden? I suspect that it's this interesting slope here, but nope. Okay, the bishop's palace is the museum, but where is the Roman garden? And the museum looks suspiciously closed on Sunday. Very strange. Maybe we can at least find some rare ferns on the old walls. Don't tell me the Roman garden is in this little enclosed space over there. I'm afraid those 8-meter city walls are a bit too tall for me. Oh, look at that. I've never seen this. Some pyramidal apples, or could it be some sorbus hybrid? Well, they definitely grow in columnar shape, and they have some small apple-like fruits, and there are 2 of them. Interesting. Is this the Roman garden? Bitter orange, lavender, yew, cypresses, bay leaf, grapes. Oh, look at that, citrons. Not too impressive. The coat of arms of this bishop is a true menagerie. Cats, dogs, and some other strange things. This museum doesn't seem to be too popular. It's opening only in the afternoon. Not gonna wait so long to see like 5 Roman plants with labels. Well, beautiful town, beautiful walls, beautiful old houses, beautiful old nature, but both the Bible garden and the Roman garden were not even meh, but By the way, if you wonder what those kiri trees look like, here are a couple in town. Probably not too old, I would say, less than 20 years, but already quite big. Most probably the plantation trees were even younger and smaller than those when they were cut down. As I said, the fastest growing tree in the world. I didn't believe it when the Chinese claimed they grow 6 meters a year. But then one in my street in Germany grew over 7 meters in 1 year. Yes, it grew from an old stump, but still 7 meters are 7 meters. So now I believe a little bit more in what the Chinese say. No, not in everything, but when they have some outrageous claims about agriculture, I check them before I ridicule them. And here, by the way, the wonderful lime flowers. Yeah, this is a good time for bees and beekeepers. Oh, but here again you see the dead bumblebees under the lime tree, and this will increase a lot in June. Yeah, nobody could ever figure out why there are so many dead and dying bumblebees under the lime trees. This is one of the big mysteries of nature in Germany. Oh, and after the Jura silverlings, here we have the so-called Chinese money. When the fruits of this mustard are ripe and the green stuff falls off, let me see if I can get it out. Well, there is a central layer which is the only one that persists, and it's really nice and shiny and silvery. Also it's a mustard. It tastes mustardy. Very mustardy actually. And also quite bitter. Here are some more. They are starting to ripen, but I still cannot free. Trying to free the shiny Chinese money, but it's not working. Chinese money like this, fake money, Asians like to burn on certain occasions, and those silvery things are also considered fake money. Oh, flowerberry sorbus. Fruits are edible, and also, as the name suggests, you can make them into flour, but all this only when they are ripe. I'm almost back at the train station, but except for this poisonous dogwood, not many fruits. I saw a couple unripe cherries. I didn't even see strawberries or mulberries or loquats. A bit disappointing fruit-wise, but the old town was beautiful. Back at the train station, the giant Armenian bramble, flowering like crazy. The bees love it. Yeah, we'll have a bumper crop this year, I guess, if you don't get rain at the wrong time. Even in spring you can eat a part, namely the young shoots, after you peel them. Yeah. Still nice and tender, but the dimensions of the edible part are getting smaller as the wood, as the non-really woody stem hardens. Another mustard. This is some bunias, probably Bunias orientalis. And here Tragopogon, plant with really edible, with really tasty edible young buds. But I'm a little bit late. Giant dandelions once the fruits get ripe.